before Ed and Norman come up, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Culture Impact Teams. Who's heard of the Culture Impact Teams? Okay, who has not heard of the Culture Impact Teams? All right, listen up. Family Research Council in Washington, D.C., Tony Perkins, they have what they call the Culture Impact Teams. They're set up in churches. And it's the people in the churches that have a mind towards what's going on in the civil arena. Anybody here care what's going on in the civil arena? I thought so. So we launched these this last fall, and Sioux Falls had a lot of interest, and I've spent a lot of time in Sioux Falls getting these rolling in Sioux Falls. Now it's time to ramp up Rapid City. If you are interested at all, please see me. We have over on the table this little pamphlet, talks about the Culture Impact Teams, and we have a clipboard, looks like this. You can sign your name on there, some contact information. I will get a hold of you and give you some more information about that. And there's 4 basic things that a Culture Impact Team does. It's in your church, and it is a help to the pastor. It's not to burden the pastor with more. But there's 4 things it does. First one is inform. It lets the congregation know, it lets the pastoral staff know what's going on, and we will keep you informed as to things that are going on. You're going to see things in your community that's going on, and informing people what the issues are. And then second, equipping people how to handle those situations, how to speak into people's lives regarding the things that are going on in our culture. There's some great resources that we have to help equip the body, the church body, to be able to address these things. And then third is to send out the alert. We've got something coming into city council. We send out an alert, and you, your team, with your pastoral staff can decide what you are going to do with that. Come down to city council, speak to an issue that's going on, write the legislators. Are you with me? There's a lot that can be done. There's a lot of projects that we can do. And then, of course, mobilize or engage the church to get them together, networked together. Right now, we have some questionnaires going out to school board members here in the Rapid City area. And there's 3 Culture Impact Teams that have been invited to go in on this, to put that out to the school board. So there's a lot that can be said. I can come, I can train a couple of you, I can train a bunch of you. I think our biggest team's 15 people out in Sioux Falls. So let me know, and I will come and get you guys started. I'll give you the nuts and bolts of how to get a Culture Impact Team going in your church. I really want to ramp this up here in Rapid City and get the teams networked across the state. There was a time when we didn't need organizations like Family Heritage Alliance. Right? Why not? The church was doing it. Where's the church on a large scale today? We've been excused from getting involved because of different things. We won't go into that. But it's time for the church to step up again and be that moral presence in our culture, in the civil arena, the things that are going on that affect us, our kids, our religious freedom, life, liberty. So please get in touch with me on that. And I will now turn it over to our illustrious Ed Randazzo.
My clicker. Do I know how to operate this?
That's it.
Ooh.
That's up.
Okay. So thank you all for coming. First of all, I trimmed my beard for you, so I'm glad you showed up. But I want to start out with 2 things before we get into the bills themselves. Number one is, I know I can speak for Norman in thanking you all for your prayers during this session, because I know Norman did, and I certainly felt them. There were some days that were tough to take and some days that were made easier by your prayers, and I thank you very much. Please don't stop sending them. The second thing I want to deal with first is I've now spent personal time with many of the legislators in Pierre, and I can tell you that we hear all kinds of stories in the press and people complaining, but I can tell you that we have some really godly men and women in this legislature, and they are all there trying to do the best they can. So I want to take a moment to have all the legislators who are present here or who have served in the legislature to stand, and let's tell them thank you. It's not easy. So there were 535 bills, that's all, just 535. 320 House bills, 215 Senate bills, 138 resolutions and commemorations. Just a few things to look at. But we were able to handle it because we boiled it down to actually handling 25 bills. And of those 25 bills, we won 15 times. And we lost 10 times. And we're going to talk about a couple of those, a few of those, as we get along here. Norman, would you run the clicker for me, please? I'm not a clicker guy. Okay, so let's start with, and you'll excuse me for a minute, but I want to tell you that most of the things I've talked about, I have named these things. They are unofficial names. They mean something to me, probably not to you, but the first one is called a Good First Stop Resolution. It's SJR 1, and it was a resolution to protect the South Dakota Constitution from being amended too easily. So right now, or in the previous law, you had to have only 50% plus one on the ballot to get a constitutional resolution, a constitutional amendment passed. And so what this bill did was to raise that bar to 55%. I think it's a good first step. I think that the Constitution should be defended, and we believe that. And so look at our U.S. Constitution, 231 years, 27 amendments, and those first 10 went in right away. So it's was much more difficult, still is, to amend the U.S. Constitution. We think the South Dakota Constitution is wonderful, but from time to time might need to be amended, and the people have the right to vote for that. And so we supported that, and it did pass. So it'll be on the ballot in November. You'll be able to cast a vote, yay or nay, on that. Okay, next one is actually a set of three that are kind of related in a way because they were brought forth by either the Attorney General or the Judiciary Committee. There's SB 67 that we didn't spend a whole lot of time on, and I call that the Second Chance Bill. It was an act to permit a victim of child sex trafficking or exploitation to expunge any criminal or delinquency record obtained as a result of the victimization. It gives these folks a second chance because there was some compelling testimony in committee by actual victims who were saved from this sex trafficking but had criminal records because of the activities prior to being saved and as they were minors. And so this allows them to, if they're a person over the age of 18 may petition a court to expunge their records and give them a second chance. We thought that was really a good idea, so we supported that. And it passed wonderfully without any dissenting votes in any of the committees or on both the Senate and the House floor. Then there was the next bill, which is SB 61, which I call the 3-day or go-away bill. And so it's revised certain provisions regarding sex offender registration. So if sex offenders in South Dakota change their address, for example, if they move from Sioux Falls to Rapid City, vice versa, they have 3 days to report to the officials if they're coming Sioux Falls to Rapid City, would be in Sioux Falls, and then they have 3 days when they get to Rapid City. And so there is no chance of slipping through the cracks. And it's a really good bill. Once again, it went through without dissenting votes, praise the Lord. We're protecting our folks that way. The third one is Senate Bill 64, which I call the Attempt Equals Commit Bill. And this is, I'll read to you, the enact of revise certain provisions regarding to attempted human trafficking in the first degree and to provide a penalty, therefore. So what this is if human trafficking is attempted on a minor, that the very attempt means they were treated as though they were had committed the crime. So we're trying to clamp down on this scourge on our society, this human trafficking, and anything we can do to retard that would be a good move, in my opinion and in our opinion. So that also went through without a dissenting vote, so we didn't need to work very hard on those. When do you kick in here?
The next one.
Next one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So another note on that one. So at first it sounds kind of sketchy that you can charge someone with a crime even if they haven't committed it. You know, they tried but they didn't commit it. But the story behind it is if they set up a sting and they advertise out, you know, a 15-year-old girl, whatever, and the guy comes to the sting, they're not going to actually let that progress. They're going to stop it, get the guy because it was a sting. So that's the situation that the bill was needed. So moving on to SJR 9, Yankton Gaming. Do I get cool nicknames or?
Sure.
Oh, I didn't know if you had set cool nicknames for mine. So SJR 9, what's happening is there's a convention center that they're building down in Yankton. And they're trying to do economic development, tourism, the whole 9 yards. So they're trying to build this convention center, and they wanted gaming as one of the options. And so right now, the only games of chance that are allowed are, you know, the state video lottery or Deadwood, if you want like table games and things like that. And so in order for them to have these games, you know, craps, roulette, keno, that whole 9 yards, they needed a constitutional amendment. And so there's 2 ways you can amend the Constitution. You can either get the legislature to put it on the ballot, or you can get the signatures to put it on the ballot. Years ago, Deadwood tried the legislature. They said no. They got the signatures, got it on the ballot. That's why we have Deadwood Gaming. Yankton came to the legislature and said, we want this put on the ballot because we would like gaming. We want to be competitive with our neighbors around, etc. We were against it for several reasons. First of all, it's just a straight-up expansion of gaming. If you see, you can look at the triggers, and proximity to a casino is a high trigger rate for problem gaming and addictions. So right now, the people of Yankton, there's one casino 36 miles away, the others are 70 and 80 miles away. So it's an obvious increase of risk for those that have a weakness towards gaming to add the casino there. And also the native reservations and the native casinos, they didn't want the revenue hit. So it was us, the native community. Deadwood didn't want it because they had to get the signatures, so they said, why should Yankton not have to get the signatures? So it was kind of not a 1-2 punch, it was like a 1-2-3 punch. And so that made it out of committee with no recommendation, which means we're sending it to the floor do with it what you want. And on the floor they were 6 votes short, 4 votes? So it died pretty hard on the Senate floor, so that was kind of cool. And then next is 1279. So over the past 5-6 years, there's been a couple different attempts to repeal video lottery. We've seen a lot of addictions. We've seen a lot of secondary negative effects. And Representative Mills this year said, I want to get rid of this thing, and I'm going to make a financial case of why. Because we've always had the moral case. We've always had the, you know, this is hurting people, this is hurting families, this is causing addictions, all of that. Representative Mills in committee took crime statistics and all of it, and he actually showed that video lottery could potentially actually be costing the state right now. We get $100 million into the state coffers every year But with what he laid out, it's potentially costing us even more than that. I think it got one vote. When you send a $100 million bill to appropriations, it's not coming out. The appropriations is not going to give up $100 million. So that got killed with, I think, one yes vote. But it's a good discussion to have. And it was something similar was brought last year. We may get on one again next year, but it's just a good discussion that we need to have. And now you're up. 1305.
We're going to 110?
1305.
1305. Let me find 1305. Oh, where are you hiding? I don't have 1305.
That was Dennert's with.
Oh, here it is. Okay, we oppose this bill, 1305. I call it the No Party Squatters Bill. This is an act to authorize independents to vote in a primary election for one of the major parties. It would have set up a situation where someone could have chosen to be no party affiliation and yet could declare that they want to vote in either the Democrat primary or the Republican primary. And so they could switch around back and forth. Who knows what they're up to? I just don't think it's a situation that we should allow to happen. I am a Republican, not because it's something you have to do to get elected to office, or I like the name, or I do like elephants, but that has nothing to do with it. I'm a Republican because I believe in the Republican platform and all the planks in it, and that's why I'm a Republican. And if we would have others from other parties, or a person who doesn't want to declare a party, to vote in our primaries, they get to choose who is the Republican standard bearer, and we thought that was a bad idea. And so we did oppose this bill. It failed on the House floor, and we were very happy. And so then we got what?
Yeah, next I'll do SB 94. So many of you may be familiar with the Opportunity Scholarship. It was set up several years ago, and what it is it's a set of standards that if a high schooler will take XYZ courses and get certain scores on them and get a 24 on their ACT, then they'll get this scholarship from the state. Mm-hmm. And what it was set up is basically to just encourage kids to take a rigorous high school transcript, take a lot of the hard classes, and really set themselves up well for college. So what the standards are is if you take, it has a list of courses in statute, and it says you need to get a 24, and then Board of Regents has also said in administrative rule that you need to have a 3.0 GPA. So that's the standards to get this scholarship, public school, private school, etc. And then they also have this other caveat that says if you don't meet all of those other course requirements, you can still get a 28 on the ACT and qualify. So you can either do the courses and a 24 or a 28. And what's happening is homeschoolers will come, turn in their transcript with the courses and a 24 or 25 or 26, and they're saying, no, you don't count, you don't meet the qualifications, because the transcript they turned in was not a state accredited transcript from a public school, private school, etc. So what they're saying is, even if you turn in all the course requirements on a homeschool transcript with a parent signature at the bottom, you didn't meet the requirements, you need a 28. So Cole Christian was actually the spokesperson for our bill. He's 18, 19. I think he got a 27 on the ACT. He met all of the requirements. He had the GPA. He had all of that. But because Board of Regents and Department of Ed looked at his transcript and said, that's not a legit transcript, you need a 28, he didn't qualify for the scholarship. So what 94 does is it basically set up in statute a mirror image of what the public school requirements are for homeschoolers. Just explaining it and basically saying the transcript counts. The parent signed at the bottom, it's a legitimate transcript, count it for the scholarship. Went through the Senate with a decent fight. I think we had 25 votes, but it was a decent fight on the Senate side. We get to the House side, we get to committee, no opposition, there was one no vote. We get to the House floor, we were expecting a whole bunch of fireworks. It was kind of quiet. It goes through like 66-1. That was kind of cool. So we're like, okay, what's going on here? It wasn't supposed to be that easy. So then it goes to the governor's desk, and we don't really have a whole lot of info on where he's going to be. We've had different soft statements of it's probably going to be okay, things like that, and then he vetoes it. Because what he said in his message is that when a public school turns in a transcript, if they say XYZ math, the state can ask that school to send them the curriculum and make sure that XYZ math meets whatever curriculum the state has set as the standards, which I'm also told is a lot tied to the Common Core standards, so that goes even deeper. And what they're saying is, when a homeschool student turns in their transcript, since they don't want to tell us all of their curriculum that's associated with that transcript, it doesn't count. So it was vetoed, and I think we lost the veto override by 3 votes? 3 or 4. So we had 4 or 5 different flips on us. So that one was kind of a bummer. We're going to talk with the sponsors and see if we can bring that one again next year. But that was what we thought was a win. I think our website even says it's still a win. We got to change that. But as of just a few days ago, we lost that one. You want to do 1123?
Yeah, I'm going to do 1123. 1123 is an act to prohibit certain persons suffering from a severe mental illness from receiving capital punishment. This was a pretty controversial issue. It passed through the House, went over to the Senate side where it failed, and then it got smoked out back on. It failed in committee on the Senate side, and then got smoked out to the floor of the Senate, but still was defeated on the floor of the Senate. With the opponents saying that this was a first step toward outlawing capital punishment in South Dakota. I get that. We wanted to pass this bill because we thought it was a good situation for folks who are mentally ill. Several suffer from mental illness. It also expunged from our code the use of the term mentally retarded, and so it corrected that to intellectually disabled. It's a pretty interesting situation. I think it's going to be back next year. We'll see what happens, but for this time it was certainly defeated.
Cool, so I'll take the next 2. You'll see they have the same title. It's because they were the same bill, or at least started that way. So what it is it's a college campus free speech bill. And what it does is it protects basically all the free speech rights of students on campus. It gets rid of speech zones. At USD, they had 2 buildings, and then the grass around those 2 buildings, or if you want to hand out pamphlets, you want to get signatures, you want to have a demonstration, anything like that, has to be done in that little area. If you look at the map of campus, it was, I think, a full page, and there's these 2 little boxes on it. That was the free speech area. So if you want to get signatures, you have to be there. If you want to hand out a pamphlet, it has to be there. If you want to hand out a pamphlet, it has to be approved 2 days beforehand. A whole bunch of things like that. And then you have all the underlying stories of, no, there wasn't an actual policy that they hit us over the head with, but they shut down this, or they told us we couldn't do that. For example, in USD, there was a movie that is still up for debate of whether or not it was censored or simply delayed, but there was issues on college campuses in South Dakota. If you look at the Alliance Defending Freedom, our national ally, one of their branches is Center for Academic Freedom. And if you look on their map, they have, I don't know how many dots. I think I stopped counting at like 150. So I mean, across the nation, all of these different free speech violations where they've filed suit or just simply sent a letter and policy was changed, etc. If you look at South Dakota, there's no dots. So we haven't had a major blow up here yet. So this is somewhat preventative, but we also had enough evidence to say it's actually needed. It's not just pie in the sky. So 1073, the first free speech bill, was sent to judiciary. And for those of you that aren't familiar with PEER, unless your bill deals with human trafficking, police officers, or a criminal record, if you get sent to judiciary, it's because they want your bill dead. So we found out pretty quick we were sent to judiciary. And so Senator Stalzer, who was the prime on the Senate side, said, I'll drop the exact same verbiage on the Senate side. So once the House bill dies, we've got the same thing on the Senate. So sure enough, the bill died in committee on House side. We had, I think, 4 different national sponsors, a couple different students coming up and helping us. We had a pretty good presentation. I think we got 2 votes in committee, something like that. Died pretty hard. It was supposed to. So then we had the Senate version, and we were looking really positive for the Senate version. We talked to everyone on the committee. It was looking good. It's kind of interesting. I've never seen a bill get amended so much and so quickly, so close to the hearing. Exactly. They had an appointee that they had to deal with at the beginning of the committee, so it started like 10 minutes afterwards. And our guy and the Department of Education are literally outside, like rewriting a third of it to make it amenable for both parties. We get in there, they're constantly talking about amendments. Our guys, Board of Regents, et cetera, are trying to work this thing out. Committee hearings are usually 2 hours long, and if you get an hour, that means you had a controversial bill. They gave us an hour and 45 and then said we're going to come back after lunch and continue discussing this. We had several students in there. We had a couple national sponsors. So it was a really good hearing. So died on Senate side. That one was a little bit rougher take than the other side because House side we knew it was going to die. But a couple of the things that came out really good of that hearing, it's first of all one of the deepest ones I've ever seen. I mean, they were drilling not just into the weeds, but into all the details. And at one point, that senator brought the Board of Regents up, who we've been railing through this whole hearing. And she says, stop saying there's no problems. You keep saying there's nothing going on, but you're going to fix it. Stop saying there's nothing going on here. If this dies today, you've got a year to get your act together. She goes, are you willing to work with these guys and figure out what's going on? Pointing to our national sponsors. Are you willing to work with them? Are you willing to get this figured out? Because please stop saying there's nothing going on. So that was good. The Board of Regents has a clear directive from multiple legislators that you better get this fixed, you better get it straightened out, or next year you're not going to have our no vote. We might pass this thing. So then last we've got 110.
Norman put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on that, and he did a fabulous job. The last bill we want to talk to you about is SB 110. For those of you who attended the pre-legislative event that we had, we talked about this bill. I call it the gotcha bill. It is a bill that has 16 sections in it. 15 of them are legislative findings that prove that Planned Parenthood has not been complying with existing law in the counseling area for women who are seeking information regarding abortions. 15 findings that go against them and are now codified in our law that exposes their abuses. I'll read you just this. I think there's 2 things. We're kind of running out of time, so I want to get this across to you, though. The legislature finds that the physicians, agents, and employees performing or assisting in the performance of abortions and pre-abortion counseling at the Planned Parenthood facility in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, have been providing pre-abortion counseling that does not comply with the mandatory disclosures required by the law. And one of the other things that just drove me on was, because there were some moments that were difficult in the House committee, and I want to get to that because I love even reading this. Now they are mandated to provide a statement. This is Planned Parenthood is mandated to provide a statement orally and in writing to the pregnant mother that an abortion will terminate the life of a whole, separate, unique, living human being, and provide counseling in lay terms to explain this disclosure. I think that alone was worth this bill. And you see up on the screen behind me the signing by Governor Dugard. That is the team that worked on this bill. We worked long and hard on it. We had little opposition. on the Senate side, but on the House side, it was, in committee, it was pretty rough. We assembled a team that included a attorney from New Jersey who is well-versed, Harold Cassidy, for those of you that know him, was a turning point in committee and got this passed. We think that this is a great victory for the pro-life cause in South Dakota. And so we were joined by folks, we weren't alone, of course, as you can see. South Dakota Right to Life, Concerned Women for America, Catholic Conference was a huge factor, and we thank them all very much. And so I think that is the conclusion.
Yeah, so before we pitch it back to Phil, if you look on your tables, there's a blue and green, I think 3 pages. That's our scorecard. Just printed them off this morning, finished it yesterday. And you'll see at the top, I think we have like 8 or 9 bills, something like that. You'll see at the beginning we said we're on 25 bills this year. They're not all on there because we look at all the bills and we try to figure out, we want to give you guys an honest representation of how we believe people voted, and a good representation of that. So that's why there's only like 8 or 9 on there, even though we were on 25 bills, because we wanted to give an honest picture and not paint things one way or the other. But that's our newest scorecard if you want to just take a look at that. Otherwise, I guess Mom's up next.
Yep.